Welcome to today's session, everyone.
We are Pre-Med CC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021.
Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities, with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians.
And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to anyone.
We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation pre-med students,
people that lack the financial resources, or just those who do not know people in the medical field.
One of the best parts about our events is that they are virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home.
We typically have events on Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 Pacific Standard Time.
If you aren't able to attend the event, all of our sessions are uploaded on our YouTube channel.
Many of our sessions will end up with a Q&A with the speakers.
Any questions that you have, you may put it in the Q&A session on Zoom, and our team members will read them and have them answer.
After you have attended our event, you can log into our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to our session today.
If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today.
If you want to stay connected with the upcoming events or just want to tell your pre-med friends about the Pre-Med CC, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok as @PreMedCC.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for our speakers being here today. Let me just introduce them really quickly. So, Maria Raul Navarro Jr. is a graduate physician assistant in the program at Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing at UC Davis. He completed his undergraduate degree in psychobiology at UCLA in 2018. He's a first-generation Mexican-American and the son of immigrants from the state of Sinaloa and Jalisco. He is passionate about helping underrepresented minority students interested in pursuing the PA profession and looks forward to answering all your questions. And Omar Manuel Nunez is a first-generation Mexican-born and raised in San Fernando Valley. He received his bachelor's degree from California State University Northridge, where he also became a published organic chemist. He is currently a third-year PA student at Stanford University. His clinical background comes from emergency medicine, as he was an EMT for over 2 years. He is an NHSC scholar, so he intends to work with the primary care setting, but he also loves the idea of working in the ED. His experiences as a son of the immigrant family drive him to diversify medicine, uplift underserved communities inside and outside of medicine. Lifestyle medicine is an area of interest that he plans on advancing in his practice as a PA in the future.
Thank you, Marco. All right. Welcome, everyone, to another installment of our PA series. As you can see, I actually have not yet shared the PowerPoint slides, but as I will share in a little bit, today we're going to be talking about the PA school experience and kind of just giving you all of the advice and tips and things we wish we would have heard before starting our own PA program. And of course, you can always drop the questions in the chat, and then Omar and I are going to be essentially going through these slides. There are about 15 to 17, I believe about 17 slides. So this one's going to be a bit shorter one. And we want to be able to, one, answer all of you guys' questions about PA school, and two, get you out on time on a Sunday night. So yeah. Brought me a water bottle. All right, let me share this screen. All right. Can everyone see my yellow screen? All right. And as you can see, it's on brand with the premedcc.org. All right. So, yep, let's get right into it. So that to your right is Omar's beautiful face, and to your right is my ugly face. And
beautiful face.
This is our professional pictures. Like Marco mentioned, I graduated from the UC Davis PA program. I actually finished it back in September of this year. And as of October 11th or 15th, I found out that I passed my PANCE, which is the final board examination to become a PA. So I can officially say I am a certified PA or a PAC. And Omar is right behind me. How much school do you have left, Mr. Omar?
Yes, so I finish around April and walk around June. So almost there, about 4 more rotations left, and I'll be following in the Mexican PA's footsteps.
All right. And so the first thing that we'll highlight is just our individual programs. And so I attended, like I said, UC Davis Health. And this picture on the left is actually a overhead of the actual hospital, which is a tertiary care center, and one of the only, I believe, in Sacramento County that's a tertiary care center, a level 1 trauma center. So it is essentially your highest level of care in a pretty big radius of the surrounding Sacramento area and the surrounding regions, all the way out to like Stockton, if you know where that is. But this is essentially about 2 hours, I would say about 2 hours away from Stanford and about 2 hours away from kind of the Bay Area, to put it in perspective. And then this middle picture here is actually the main hall, Betty Irene Moore Hall, where our PA program is housed. This picture here actually overlooks the actual like mock clinical area where we would do our OSCEs, or our simulated patient encounters. And so that's what this area is here. And then you see a little bit of our workspaces. So it is a newer building that was built in, like, I believe, like 2014 or 2015. It was inaugurated, so it is not very old, and it's like very
nice,
state of the art, and really beautiful. And then we'll highlight Stanford. Take it away, Omar.
Yeah. So just like Mario was saying, so on the left, you probably can't see my cursor. So on the left is a Lee Cushing medical building. So that's where, PA students, medical students, and other biosciences, PhD individuals or master students that are in the School of Medicine take their classes. There's a number of like conference halls and classrooms. We start off in like a pretty big conference room, as you can see at the bottom side. That's us with the medical students for anatomy. We take that with them. Eventually, since the PA program is pretty small, like give or take like less than 30 people, we go into like a much smaller room, much condensed room, but I couldn't find a picture of that one. And then on the right side, you'll see the new Stanford Medicine hospital. And it's relatively new, just like Mario was saying, his at UC Davis is. I think it's right around the same time, like 2015, 16, I think, for both Lee Cushing and the hospital. And it's also a tertiary hospital, level 1 trauma center. And the closest one is, the closest other trauma 1 center would probably be UCSF. And then from there, probably like UC Davis, Sacramento. I believe so. So yeah, I couldn't find pictures of what the medical building looks like, so you just have to kind of picture it being relatively nice.
And one of the things you can do for any of these schools, whether it's Stanford or UC Davis, you can actually like go on YouTube and like search up medical campus tour and actually get an idea of the campus. There's quite a bit of videos for both programs. The other thing that I'll highlight, I forgot about UC Davis, that I'm sure students are wondering is, let me see if I can go back. And the UC Davis Health PA program is 27 months long. It runs continually, so there is no like big break. We do have like a winter break between the fall and winter quarters, and that lasts for like 2 weeks. But for the most part, you're going through and through, which is intense. But also there's that advantage that you get to get in and get out sooner. And the curriculum is, as we'll show in a little bit, is structured in the first year is didactic bookwork, and then the second year is 5-week clinical rotations and the core rotations that we'll also talk about in a little bit. Omar, I know we didn't include it in here, but I guess if you could do the same for Stanford, like in terms of
and
that structure.
So Yeah, like UC Davis's program is pretty like average in terms of the length, about 27 months, as you mentioned. Stanford's is a little bit on the longer side. It's like 30, 31 months long. I think the longest one I know is about 33 months. And just off the top of my head, I think USC has 33 months. I think Rush University in Chicago, Touro University, but that's like a dual master's program, and like Rutgers. But I'm sure there's more. So it definitely is on the longer side. And I guess what accounts for that is we have a summer after our first year. It's a research year, which it really is, but you know, it's a summer nonetheless. So yeah, I think the summer really extends our stay there.
And are you guys taking do you guys get a summer break between year 1, year 2, and then year 2 and year 3?
No, just the first summer. That's it. Yeah. So we start fall, and then you know all the way through winter, spring, and then we have that 2 month long summer break. And then we do have second year we do have a 1 week summer break. So that's pretty much it.
For sure, for sure. All right. And then we will dive into some of the advice that we would give students. So if you're, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you're a student who has been accepted into a PA program, congratulations, that is huge, and that is an accomplishment that you should be very proud of. After the dust settles, you start to have these thoughts of, how am I going to prepare? What do I need to do? And so the first thing is, you're probably wondering, what should I study, or what content should I be getting to prepare? And Omar, I think we both agreed on this advice for this, to not study, to essentially use this time to really rest, to really recharge, to spend time with loved ones, and really do all of the things that you enjoy doing outside of school. And because the moment your PA program starts, you're going to be in the trenches of studying. And so I know oftentimes students, want to get ahead of the curve and want to start exposing themselves to anatomy or physiology and topics like that. But really, PA programs are structured, the curriculum is structured to take you from day one, of course, having, that undergraduate level knowledge of you taking your anatomy class, your physiology, your microbiology. They, in the PA school curriculums, they're going to take that base level knowledge, and within the first few months are going to give you a rapid review of that content before diving into the medicine. And that was pretty much the case. That's pretty much the case at all PA schools. And so you studying, anatomy or physiology may help you, and you could do that. But I would say you're probably not going to be studying what your professors want you to focus on during the didactic year. So what kind of, I don't want to say it would be useless, but I would be hard pressed to find the benefit or reward from doing that and putting yourself in that position. And so if you already have your, the day that you're going to start PA school, let's say it's let's say it's September 5th, and you're in the spring or in that summer leading up to that date, really what you want to do is prepare all of the other things in preparation for that move-in date. And it really depends where you end up being accepted, or whether you get accepted into a school that's in your city. And so you're not going to be moving. So that just means you're in a much more stable position versus, at least in my case, when I was accepted, I was out here in Southern California in the San Bernardino area, and was accepted to a program in Sacramento. And so that is, as many of you know, a 7-hour drive. And so I had to start to think about all of the logistics of, how am I going to move, all of my things. Well, we didn't have that many things, but my wife and I had to think logistically, how are we going to, get up there, and what things do we need to buy? And looking for apartments and housing and stuff like that was really something that we were looking into at that time. But really the biggest advice that we can give you is to, during this time, really try to build a routine if you haven't done so already. And if you're already living in the city where your program is, try to, get a gym membership, try to, figure out meal prepping, like those kinds of
Yeah.
things that are gonna set you up for success. Omar, what would you add to this?
I mean, I think having, like as Mario mentioned, having a routine already set in place for you is very much important, because you'll come to find as you become busier and busier, you're gonna have to start to let go of things just like naturally for natural reasons, right? But the less it is embedded into your schedule, the easier it is to remove it from your schedule once you're busy, which is what happens in PA school. So have that set in place, plan for yourself, start, before you get into PA school. And then what Mario mentioned, heavily prepare your move-in date, especially for those who are moving far away. I mean, I know some people, move out as far as the East Coast and then the West Coast. So start to look into how much, it costs to, either ship everything or ship your car. And the reason for that is because it makes having a plan set makes your first day far easier when things like that are, set in place.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the next slide that we have here is, what advice would we give to a PA student for day one? And Omar, I'll let you continue this one.
Yeah. So, you're got into school. Congrats again. And now it's day one, right? So sort of what we already mentioned, know and establish your non-negotiables. And what I mean by that is, what are the things that you don't, no matter what, can't let go of, right? Whether it's the gym, whether it's, running, time for family, time for friends, hiking, whether it's with people or with yourself, know which ones are most important to you. And the reason for that is because, if you start letting go, multiple aspects that bring happiness to your life, you're going to burn out quicker. So knowing what your non-negotiables are, is going to help you with endurance and with not burning out. And then for me, specifically, my first quarter, I did move from Los Angeles County, moved up to like Sanford or Palo Alto, and new place, a new time, and I did have family like in San Jose, less than an hour from here, but I wanted to find my group specifically here. So I did focus most of my first quarter on finding my group of people, and it can take time. It can be pretty exhausting, especially if you're a little introverted, because you're meeting a lot of people. You're always introducing yourself. But dedicating that time can help you in the long run, right? Especially if you like to study with a group of people, or you just like to study around people. Having that foundation already in your quarter, in the first quarter, first day, or like, first couple of months, it'll help you with the progression, of your time in PA school. And then sort of like what Mario was saying, on day one, right? We might have everything perfectly planned. We've been planning everything on our iCalendar, Google Calendar. We have everything to the T since you knew you got into PA school. Things may take a turn. Not everything goes as planned. And I think that's something we should keep in mind, and be okay with and get used to, because in PA school, things are not going to go your way. Even when you put all this energy and effort into it. So show yourself some grace and start to know how to show yourself some grace, so you can be able to finish PA school, not just finish it, but finish it with not some ease, but with some happiness, along the way. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Mario?
And the thing I would add as well is, again, day one may not be how you expect it to be. And that was very much the case for me. Little story time, when I found out that I got accepted into my PA program about, I want to say, like 6 to 7 months before the program started. And so it was like December of the previous of the year before I started. As soon as I found out, I was like, all right, we're going to Davis. I started looking at, housing and apartments and things like that. And because it was COVID, which worked in my favor, in the first, I want to say few months, like 2 or 3 months, were completely online. And day one started of my orientation, and my wife and I had already driven 3 times up to Sacramento to look for housing for an apartment with no luck. And so when I started my PA program, I still had not secured housing. And that's not, I mean, that's my own unique circumstance, but it very much did not fit what I expected my day one to be. I expected my day one to be my wife and I moved in Sacramento. I expected to have, you know, my nice little desk with my lamp and with my monitor and with everything set up that I needed to be successful. And that very much was not the case. We actually found ourselves, I think when I started PA school, and we were still in Southern California, and we were actually house sitting for about a month. And one of my wife's aunts, she let us house sit. And so I was literally sitting at a table at a desk in a home that was not my own. And you know, trying to digest all of the emotions and stressors that come with starting, you know, a PA program like this. And so again, the big take home is show yourself grace. And whether it's for housing, whether it's for even on the first day, like you may show up late because you went to the wrong parking lot. Like my wife just started her PhD program, and on her first day, she was late to her first class because she didn't account for how far away the parking lot was. And so those little things, don't let them ruin your day. You know, show yourself some grace, and keep pressing forward, and know that, like finding your group of people, the entire cohort that is in that class for the first day is going through the same emotions, the same stressors, the same feelings of being overwhelmed as you. And so misery loves company. And so you'll be able to, I think, quickly find, you know, your group of people within the first, you know, few weeks. All right. So now we go into some of the nitty gritty that students like to see is what does a didactic, the bookwork, the first year schedule look like? Here we actually have a snapshot of Stanford's didactic schedule. And so what each quarter consists of, how many units. And then we see from year 1 to year 2, they're doing 5 quarters. How long are your guys' quarters? 10 weeks? I think your microphone is off.
My apologies. Typically 10 weeks. Our summer quarter or autumn quarter actually is longer. It's almost like a semester. Okay. So that one is about like 15 weeks or so, but typically 10 weeks for the rest of them.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. And we see here, at least for the first quarter that you took, the heaviest unit class was clinical anatomy and practice of medicine. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like as you mentioned, clinical anatomy, I think, is one of the classes that everyone talks about, especially the first quarter. As you can see here, we also took histology, embryology, which actually is not a requirement at all for PA schools. It's a requirement for medical schools. And since our first quarter is essentially almost entirely integrated with the medical students, we actually take it with them. So it's just like, I guess, brownie points for us, but it's not essential for PA schools. And that's why the first quarter here has a whole bunch of units. And then everything else, our second quarter, that's when we start our block systems. And our block systems are essentially, it's going to be principles of clinical medicine. Block systems are integrated blocks of certain, I guess you can say, like organ systems, or think of them as departments in medicine. So for example, our first block consisted of dermatology. And then, you know, that's about 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks or so. They run through that quick and then move on to like ENT. And then, you know, you move on to, MSK. And then starting the third quarter, that's when we start doing multiple blocks at a time with other classes, and it just kind of gradually builds up that way. So the coursework does build up and it gets heavier. And the content, for the most part, gets like tougher, you know, for the most part, but you get used to it, and that makes it easier, I will say. I think the first quarter with block system was like, you know, like it's first of its kind, and I think the toughest part is just knowing how to study and figuring out what is a proper way to study,
which we'll be talking about in a little bit. And kind of how you mentioned, UC Davis is the same way. We do block systems, organ systems. And for those of you who heard Omar just say ENT. ENT is the system of ear, nose, and throat. And then MSK is our musculoskeletal system, which is essentially bones and muscles. But really the nice thing about having your PA programs formatted in that way is that, at least, I don't know if this was the case for Stanford, but at Davis, if our clinical medicine course that was teaching us like pulmonology or cardiology, if we were learning the diseases, our pharmacology course was also on the same block teaching us cardiology meds or pulmonology meds. And then in our clinical therapeutics class, or our own version of like our clinical skills course, we were learning how to do a proper cardiac exam. So the nice thing is that even though you have 3 different classes, they're all on the same subject, on the same body system. If we were learning GI, gastrointestinal, in like our clinical skills course, we were learning how to do a proper abdominal examination. Was that the case for you at Stanford, Omar?
Yeah, and honestly, I loved how synchronized things were, just as you're saying, and it helps with organizing your thoughts in your head and also repetition. So I appreciated how things were separated, like pharmacology was separated from like the disease state classes, because you have to really focus on each one individually, and then just wrap it up with the skills classes.
Yeah, because the nice thing too of it was there's some overlap, right, between the pharmacology, between the clinical medicine component, and that's really nice to have, because even though you're studying for a different class, that information is going to help you on the other 2 exams for those 2 other classes, which is something that you really don't experience in like an undergraduate college or even at a community college, because you're obviously you're taking, when you're an undergraduate, you're taking classes, you could be taking a stats class, an art class, a history class, a science class. And so what you're studying in one class doesn't relate to, the other. And that can be tough to juggle sometimes. So that's also one thing to just keep in mind, is that even though you're taking a bunch of classes and a bunch of units, the way they structure the curriculum, it kind of helps with being able to handle the volume. All right, and then here I'm zooming in on, this is 1 quarter or semester at UC Davis. And here, kind of similar to Stanford's, the highest unit class was our primary healthcare, which again is just a fancy term for our clinical medicine course, where we're diving into different diseases and body systems, as you see here. Module content focused on organ systems, including but not limited to cardiovascular, dermatologic, endocrine, ENT, gastrointestinal. And then there was always a pharmacology course, and then an advanced clinical skills. And then this course, the health status and care systems, was actually about learning about like our healthcare system in the US and like how to navigate that. And then also social determinants of health, which is essentially learning about how, certain populations that live in certain areas sometimes are afflicted with certain diseases because of just the environments that they're in. All right. And Omar, I'll let you take over this one, and you can give us the introduction in ultraradian rhythm. It sounds so cool.
It is pretty cool. Well, before I get into this too, just want to say, like, obviously this is for PA school, like the topic is PA school, but this is very much applicable to anything, right? Grad school, different schools, undergraduate school. I wish I actually knew this material that, me and Mario are going to present as an undergrad. I feel like it would go a long way. So with study tactics, so the ultradian rhythm or cycle, essentially it's a biological 90-minute cycle that our body already has within our system, that is going on in the background without us even knowing. And it's essentially like pretty similar to the circadian rhythm. If you guys have heard that, it's like the physical and mental and behavioral changes that change in a 24-hour cycle for us. Well, they both are essentially on the same wavelength, works synergistically, I would say. And so when does it begin, right? So if this is a 90-minute cycle happening every day, like when does it actually begin? Really hard to tell. The only way to tell essentially is, when you wake up, when do you feel most alert? Like at what point in the morning are you at your greatest state of mental alertness? And the easiest way to tell is, wake up a couple of times and see if it takes long or how long it takes for you to feel ready. And that can be like manipulated a little bit with coffee. If you exercise early in the morning, that can influence a cold shower that can influence the cycle a little bit. But the only way to tell is if you experiment on yourself, right? So if you wake up at 7 in the morning and you feel groggy, up until like 8:30, then probably that's when you start going up in the arousal state, as you can see here on the graph. So as you can see, so it's 90 minutes, right? But as you can see, there's a slope that goes up. Typically, the highest point of alertness is like 60 minutes after you feel that gradual increase, given that it's a 90-minute cycle. So I don't know if you guys know, when you like try to study, right? For me, at least, I'll sit down, be ready, have my coffee, but it takes me quite a few minutes to like actually get into a rhythm. And that's basically you gradually like getting to your top performance, or the peak of your alertness, if you will. And so during these like 90-minute bouts, there's like molecules and hormones that control neuroplasticity. And for those who don't know what neuroplasticity is, essentially is the ability for your neuron to rewire and grow. This is where you retain information and where they can make new connections. And that's where learning comes in, critical thinking comes in. And the function of not to get too much in the weeds, the glucocorticoid system, which is adrenals produce like cortisol and hormones of such. Cortisol has a bad rep, right? You think of cortisol, you think of stress, but it's a very essential hormone, and actually peaks up in the morning. And it's actually it fluctuates according to the wavelength, so they're pretty on par. So once your cortisol levels go up in the morning, the higher it goes, probably the more alert you will be. Obviously, if you're too stressed, everything kind of deteriorates from there. But just wanted to mention that. And so let's see. So watch in the morning how long it takes for you to get focused, and then from there, the best way for neuroplasticity to actually occur is through sleep. So this is where actually neuroplasticity works. So when you sleep, this is where it happens, and this is where actual rewiring of your neurons occurs. And it's not just about the quality of sleep, but also the duration of quality of sleep. And this is kind of ties into the Pomodoro technique. Some of y'all might have heard of it. It's basically a tactic, and the ultradian rhythm is like a elongated version of the Pomodoro technique. But it's a 30-minute study session, and in which you study for 25 minutes. You put your phone down, you try to just focus for 25 minutes, and it takes practice. It might sound easy, but it can be difficult when you first start it. 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break. You rest, you walk, do some push-ups, walk around, drink some water, not work on stuff. And then you repeat that 25-minute study session. And I personally use that all the time, and I think it's very effective. So just wanted to share that with y'all.
Yeah, and I'll add that with the Pomodoro technique is something that I often use in my studying thing, because really using your phone or doing, all these other things, there's always so many distractions. And you get the things that you like enjoy doing, whether it's, at least for me, sometimes it's like watching YouTube videos or things like that. I would use that as a reward. And so I would tell myself, I'm going to do 25 minutes of focused studying, and then I'm going to watch, this video or do this thing that I really want to do after the 25 minutes. And that's really just a good way to, again, motivate yourself and have a little bit of that extrinsic motivation when you are struggling to get started. And that's the other thing too, is that this can be used to get you to get going, because that's sometimes the hardest part about studying is getting started. And sometimes it may be intimidating. You'll wake up at 8 a.m., 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. and say, I'm going to study all day. And then you have your coffee and you have all your notes and you have everything already all set up, and you're just like, oh, like I'm about to study all day. And then the reality sets in and you're just kind of like, dang. But if in your mind you switch to, I'm just going to focus on the next 25 minutes, I'm just going to commit to working for these next 25 minutes, it makes an entire day of studying more bite-sized and more just manageable. And then if you have a session, a Pomodoro session, where you break concentration, or maybe your mom calls you and you end up talking to her and you lose concentration, After that time is up, you can just come back and say, all right, we're going to try again and try again to do a better concentrated Pomodoro. And so that's just, one way to just be productive with your studying and stay motivated, because the reality is when, as you'll see as a PA students, like you'll get started during your first quarter of PA school, and you're going to be studying for pretty much the majority of the day. If you're not like eating or sleeping or working out, you're either in lecture or you're going to be studying outside of it. And Jubin, your camera's on. What's up?
If you're going to use the Pomodoro method, get one of these things, and not your phone, because your phone can be distractive.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think I bought this for, I don't know, $6, $7.
Dang.
It's timer. You could set it, and then you
I like that.
Yeah, there's also these apps that I've seen that actually will lock your phone.
Yeah.
And there's one that's called Grow, apparently, that like, if I think you have to pay like 99 cents for it, but
what is it called? Grow?
I think it's called Grow, where it involves it's a little tree, and over 25 minutes it'll lock your phone, and you'll see this little plant come up, and it turns into a tree over the span of 25 minutes, and then you get to essentially grow this
plant the tree,
little garden.
There's another one called Flora. Have y'all heard of that one?
Yeah, but it's the same premise.
It's pretty similar, but there's actual options to like actually put money into it, and if you break it, like if you exit out, like that money would be theirs, but they actually plant a tree with it. So like you put $5. So it's just pretty cool. I like that one as well.
Yeah, so I have a rule that I don't have my phone, when I'm studying or sleeping. I've just decided that that's like an investment I'm making. Is I literally like put my phone in another room or in a box or turn it off.
And really, again, I think the big thing with like that example is essentially practicing, good sleep hygiene, practicing good habits, like when you wake up, when you go to bed, and even when you're studying, practicing good study hygiene, if we were to call it that, of making sure, your phone is not within reach, making sure that like you're telling, friends and family, like, we're about to focus. I'm about to put in some work, and I'm not going to be able to, go with you to, the store, go with you to Ross, and so, or wherever you shop. But yeah, now after we talk about the study tech.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, the whole thing with studying with the phone is that, like, I've gone to the library and I'm sitting there and you see people there and they're studying, but they're playing with their phone. And it's just like, don't kid yourself. Like, you're not getting anything done. Like, I'm one of those big, like, and I'm like a terrible person at multitasking. Like, and most people that like I'm like focused and I want to get something done, but yeah, and so I know someone who's actually an attending now. He puts his phone in a Faraday box so that basically he doesn't get interrupted when he's like focused on like studying or is like doing like work, because he's just like, because your phone goes off like every second. And and he's like, and I, so it's like, you got to be disciplined. And I think like that's the biggest thing you get out of this is like focus. Like 25 minutes is not, I mean, I do my Pomodoro in 15 minutes just because I just prefer it to be 50 minutes.
Yeah,
and I do 10-minute break.
And it doesn't have to be 25 minutes. Like, it's whatever works for you. For some students, who struggle to commit to 50 minutes, but 25 minutes is more doable. Sometimes
start off 25 and then work your way up.
Yeah. But really, the big thing.
Practice.
I do 50-10 just because 5 minutes is just too short for me to like do anything like that's worthy. So I was like, I could go eat something for 10 minutes, or I could go make coffee, or I go, to the restroom, or
5
text me. You need time to text me.
All right, we're gonna keep chugging along. So now I'm gonna be talking about the science of learning, which is one of the topics that I am actually very would it be passionate? I guess, passionate about. And what I'm going to be laying out here today is the 10 commandments of effective learning. And so this can be applied not only to your PA program education and you learning, but really some of this stuff you'll be able to take it away and use it during your undergraduate year as you're tackling, different coursework. And so the first commandment, number one, is beware of your own intuitions. And the word intuition, what that means is like your own perception of like saying, yeah, I learned that. Yeah, I understand that. And beware of your own intuitions. Don't choose a study strategy. Don't choose a study strategy because it feels easier or more natural or more intuitive to you. Our minds often trick us into believing that when studying feels easier, we're learning more, and that when it feels harder, we're learning less. And that feeling is an illusion. And the research shows us that the study strategies that require more effort and are more challenging to do are what the world of learning, what we call desirable difficulties, because they produce more learning. And so you want to maximize desirable difficulties. Number two, the key behind all effective learning techniques lies in forcing your mind to actively process the information. This is often harder and, of course, requires more effort, but it's precisely that effort that produces the improvement in learning. And also remember that your brain is lazy. At least my brain is lazy, pretty lazy. And it only wants to do the bare minimum effort to complete a task. That's why techniques that incorporate, again, desirable difficulties, things like testing yourself or flashcards, should not be left as a goal that you will hopefully do as you approach an exam day. But these are the techniques that should be the pillars of your day-to-day studying. Number three, the most effective learning methods are the ones that give meaning to the content and attempt to connect new information to previously established neural pathways. And so I know that this is a mouthful, but I'll give you guys kind of an example. An example of this is when we connect for a certain condition or treatment to a patient, a family member, or friend that we know. So an example of this in my own life is a while back, my abuelita was in the hospital for a tuberculosis infection, which is a pretty scary infection that manifests in the lungs, and so it affects the lungs. And I recall talking to my family members about her treatment, which included a very specific therapy that requires 4 drugs. And the acronym for that is called RIPE, R-I-P-E, which stands for, and this is just medical jargon, rifampin, isoniazid, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. These are 4 different antibiotic agents that are used to treat tuberculosis. And that specific treatment, that acronym, will forever remain in my memory because I connected it to the established neural pathway, the established memory in my brain responsible for remembering that my grandmother was in the hospital for tuberculosis. And so that is an example of how you can attach a new content, new information to either an old memory or to something that you are already familiar with. I hope that example is a kind of a clear showcase of that. Number 4, if you want to learn something new, do not, and I'll repeat it, do not start by just reading it. First, look for a challenge, something that makes you commit a mistake, that forces you to try to solve a puzzle or come up with a solution before being shown the answer. By doing this, you will not only prime your brain to more effectively absorb the material you're about to read, but you also trigger synaptic plasticity, which we talked about already, is how our brain forms new connections. And you're triggering that synaptic plasticity by making mistakes in the process. So mistakes are good. And so that's something that you can apply when you're trying to, learn some new information. Try to test yourself first before you crack open the book to try to understand it. And number 5, your mind is constantly making you think you understand subjects when in fact you don't. And this kind of goes back to the intuition thing. And to fix this, you have to get the ideas, the concepts, the content you're trying to learn out of your head. And the easiest way to do this is either by trying to apply what you've learned in terms of practice questions, or by trying to explain it to someone else. And by doing this, you will become conscious of your own learning, and you're going to be conscious of your own learning blind spots, the areas that you're weak in, and you'll be able to address them directly. Number 6, effective learning is consistent and not intensive. And so I'm talking to all of our crammers out here. And I will be honest and say that there are going to be situations in PA school where you are going to have to cram, and that is okay. But
Inevitable.
it's inevitable. But effective learning, again, this doesn't change the fact that the science of learning shows us that effective learning is consistent and not intensive. So most of us typically study single topics or contents that we're trying to learn at a time because we feel we're making significant strides in the short term, and that leaves us feeling like we're making progress. So what that looks like is, on, let's say you're taking an anatomy class and a stats class, and we would say that on this day, let's say on Monday, I'm going to focus on catching up all day on my stats class, and then the following day on Tuesday, I'm going to focus on my microbiology class. What the science of learning has to say about this is that if we actually compare the long-term progress of students who are focusing on a single subject or class per day versus switching up the content being studied every hour, every 30 minutes, or every Pomodoro session to cover a little bit of each subject each day, the latter method is far superior. The second method is far superior. And so that's what's being highlighted here, is when you are doing mass practice, when you're studying one content, let's say on Monday, and then another content on Tuesday, and then another on Wednesday, that is inferior to doing something called interleaved practice, where you study each content a little bit each day. And so how does this look like in PA school? And so I would often have classmates who, let's say we had our anatomy exam coming up on Monday, and then our pharmacology exam was going to be on a Tuesday. And they would spend that Saturday and Sunday leading up to the first exam focusing on just the anatomy class. And then after that exam, they would cram for pharmacology. What I would do is I would actually, starting Saturday, I would split my time and would do actually 2 Pomodoro sessions, 2 25-minute sessions of anatomy, and then 1 Pomodoro of pharmacology. And I would do that on Saturday, and then I would do that on Sunday. And what that allowed me to do is that I was able to spend some time on Saturday and Sunday and ensure that I wasn't neglecting my other class, the second exam. And so that's just a really effective way to essentially ensure that you're dedicating, a certain amount of time to all classes. And because what we often see in students, whether you're an undergrad or in a PA program, is that they'll do really well on the first exam and then they'll bomb the second one, or they'll get an A on the first exam and then they'll get like a C on the second one. And so that's just one tactic, I guess, to prevent that. All right, and let's move on. We got 4 more. Number 7, the bottleneck of memory is not storing the information in your brain. It's actually reaccessing that information. And so the best thing you can do to recall information is not to restudy the info several times or endlessly reread your notes. It's to teach your brain how to recover the information you have already learned. And so I'm going to talk about some ways that you can do that. And one of my favorite ones that students often use in PA school, and I'm not the only one that uses these, is using retrieval cues. And so you can greatly help your mind retrieve a vast amount of information by practicing the use of retrieval cues. And what this is essentially what we've heard of before. These are acronyms, these are images, these are stories and places that essentially help you memorize literally whatever you want. And so you can actually memorize certain diseases and the pathophysiology of diseases by coming up with a story. And one of the nice things that exists is that there are softwares out there, there are programs out there, and we'll give you guys a list of some of the ones that are popular for PA students, and that actually do this already for you. Some of these are called like Sketchy and Osmosis. And then there's ones that are free. My favorite free one is called MedComic, which is actually the same people who make this picture here. And these are actually drawn by this dude who's a PA. But essentially, I'll give you guys an example of what a retrieval cue looks like. And one of the cardiac abnormal rhythms that we are required to remember, to be able to recognize, is WPW syndrome, which is Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. The way that presents is on a rhythm strip on an EKG, which is essentially your heart rate and the rhythm of your cardiac activity. There's some characteristic findings that we see with WPW, one of which is the upsloping of this wave, and that's called a delta wave. And then this little notch here is usually shortened. And so that's called a shortened PR interval, which would be less than 120 milliseconds. For some students, like that can be sufficient to memorize that. But an even better way to really sear it into your brain is to use images like this. This picture here is the story, the image to remember that Wolff-Parkinson-White, the characteristics of WPW, Wolff-Parkinson-White, consists of a delta wave. And so we see this, what is this, like a squid pointing at the up sloping of the cardiac rhythm and reminding us that, again, there's a delta wave. We see this little notch here reminding us that this is the short PR interval. And then we see this, what is this, an electrical eel that exists to remind us that the QRS complex, which is essentially this peak here, is wide compared to like a normal heart rhythm. And then this little fishy that's flying in the air is representing that the AV node, which is a specific anatomical structure in the heart, is being bypassed by this rhythm. So again, what we see here is that this picture, this story, this cartoon essentially is serving as a memory anchor for us in the long term. And I kid you not, there was many times, both on my exams during didactic year, as well as during my board exam, where I remember these pictures and was able to recall information about a certain rhythm, about a certain condition, about a certain drug. Number 9 is the testing effect. So above all, the most superior study technique is testing yourself, the testing effect. And so one of the things that I warn students all the time is do not fall into the trap of viewing testing as a thing that you do at the end of your studying to simply assess your progress. The act of testing by itself and without feedback produces large effects on learning. This is why you need to be testing yourself and try to incorporate practice questions every day from day one that you are studying. So whether it's for a microbiology class, an anatomy class, a stats class, you want to, in one way or another, be doing practice questions and essentially practicing in the way that you're going to be expected to perform. So if your exam is going to consist of just true or false questions, then you should be studying in a true or false format. If your exam, and at least in PA school, most exams are multiple choice, A, B, C, or D. You should be practicing studying using that format. And then lastly, the secret to long-term memory is not repetition, but how you do those repetitions. And so the research tells us that the repetition should be distributed over time with progressively longer intervals. And so if you've never seen this graph before, this is something that you can Google or that you can also search on YouTube called spaced repetition. And this is a theory that essentially when you're learning something on day 0, this is the first time that you've ever seen it. The moment you, like, let's say it's a flashcard, you see flashcard number 1, you learn it. The moment you remove that flashcard from your sight, you are immediately going to start forgetting it. And this is that forgetting curve. And what this is showing us is that if we just let it be on its own, you're going to eventually forget it. But if you wait, let's say 10 minutes, and then you see it again, you reset the forgetting curve. And that waiting period actually causes the forgetting curve to start to rise, which eventually flattens out and represents long-term retention. And so you'll see this being implemented into things like Anki flashcards or Quizlet flashcards. And when you reveal the flashcard on the bottom, it'll tell you, hey, do you want to see this card in 1 minute? Was it easy? Do you want to see it in 1 day or in 10 minutes or in 5 minutes or in 1 minute? Was it really hard and you're going to see it in 1 minute? Yeah. And that's really one of the things that is very important. It's essentially to boost long-term retention. You want to be repeating the content in progressively longer intervals. Second, the actual retrievals, whether that's flashcard or testing, it needs to be actually you retrieving that information from your brain. Merely exposing yourself to the material, like opening up the textbook or PowerPoint, or like, putting it on your head and hopefully having osmosis happen, that doesn't count. And third is that you should try to balance your retrieval success, your ability to retrieve it, with retrieval effort. And so every time you see a flashcard or you see a question and you answer it, you want to take a split second to kind of reflect. Was this really difficult for me? Did I take 5 seconds to recall this, or did I take 30 seconds to recall this? And if it took you 30 seconds, or if it was really difficult for you to retrieve it from memory, that means that you probably want the interval the next time you see that flashcard or that question to not be that long. And so it could be 10 minutes or 30 minutes versus like a day. And so that's just a little quick synopsis on some of the science of learning. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always message me. And I do have actually some more content about this on my YouTube channel, shameless plug, at the Mexican PA, and you can search that up. But we will continue to chug along, and beyond talking about study skills, talk about our clinical year and what that looks like. And so just to overview the summary of study techniques, and you can take a screenshot of this. And if you're still confused on it, you can, again, reach out to me, or you can Google each one of these techniques and read about them more. And there's a ton of literature and a ton of YouTube videos where they actually dissect how to maximize and apply these techniques. And really, number one is to leverage the ultradian cycle and to use the Pomodoro technique to stay motivated. Number two is explain things to others. This is called, in some literature, the Feynman technique, where you're essentially like explaining it to a 5-year-old. If there's a really complicated concept, like right now when I was talking about, Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, I'm sure most of you have never heard of that. And so being able to explain that and be able to give, a tangible example that you guys are able to understand demonstrates that I have some level of understanding. In the same way, you can do that, whether that's your stats class, whether that's your insert whatever science class you may have, or even beyond that, for history. If you can explain it to others, to your mom, to your dog, to your wife or sister, it's gonna help with long-term retention. And then number three is active recall, which again you see with doing things like flashcards, and then spaced repetition, which is that graph that I just showed you guys with the progressively longer intervals. And you can maximize that by doing things like Quizlet or Anki. The interleaving effect, which again is studying multiple topics, different topics on the same day in different intervals. And then the testing effect, which again is testing yourself through practice questions that mimic the types of questions you're going to see on an exam. And then bonus tip, if you are a PA student, and one of the biggest resources to not forget about at your disposal is the upperclassmen. No one, and I will repeat this, and Omar will back me up, no one is going to know more about the content of your exams and how the professors test and what to focus on than your upperclassmen. And so do yourself a favor and reach out to them, whether it's a mentor that's assigned to you, or you like waiting, after their class is done, to talk to them and pick their brain. Really reach out to your upperclassmen, because not only will they have the knowledge to kind of give you some advice on like, hey, watch out with Dr. Lou, or watch out with this doctor who likes to test this way, but they're also going to have resources like the best like Anki decks or the best Quizlet decks, or they may have their own study guides that they've built that they'll hand off to you, and then you'll be able to spend less time building study guides and more time retrieving them and doing things like testing yourself. Omar, would you add anything to this?
So yeah, not so much, but this sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, right? And I think it's something that can overwhelm you. So just like try to start off with 1 or 2 things at a time, and you don't have to go full 25 minutes with the as we mentioned before. You start out 10 minutes. Like try to incorporate at least one of these if you already don't have them in your study techniques. Like incorporate them little by little. I will say, like, no matter what, hands down, repetition is key. And like you always hear that, And you know, in PA school, everything keeps repeating. You keep repeating stuff to memorize it, but you will eventually like learn that in medicine, like PA school, medical school, you're gonna have to start sneaking in medicine or studying into like every crevice of your life, and that sounds pretty intimidating. And I hated the thought of that going in, but it's just medicine. Just there's so much to learn, right? And you're not gonna know everything right away, and even in the future, and that's okay. As long as you continue to like motivate yourself and have the intuition to like study a little by little, even in your quote unquote like off days or break times. And as Mario mentioned, this is evidence based, right? So there is scientific data on this, and but although you know it's evidence based, like doesn't mean this will fit everyone's life, at least not all of them, right? I think it's important to know what you like and what you dislike, and that's fine. And you know, in these populations, these study populations, right? This is for the typical human being, right? There's always others that may not fall into them. And like, for example, like even like speech, like researchers or language researchers even exclude left-handed individuals because of how different their brain may work. And not to say if you're left-handed, you're completely different, but just know that this is for the typical human being. And if you don't like one of them, that's okay. And like, just to be fully transparent, the one I completely struggle with and I have refused to do the most is that interleaving effect. It's hard for me to not do one thing in one day. And like, I know, like Mario mentioned, like the best way, the best method, right? That's okay. If something doesn't work for you, that's okay. You know, use it to your advantage. And I think something that we want to keep like echoing is like, give yourself grace, right? If you can't do one of these, if you struggle with one of them, that's more than okay, right? Just keep going on. Like just keep giving yourself grace. That way you can not burn out and continue to move forward with your studying.
Yep.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to this, you guys, is that you might sit here and you're like, oh, yeah, you know what? I don't really need this right now. I'll just get to it when I get to, PA school. And actually, that's actually going to be really late. Try to figure out what works for you because everybody learns differently. And so, um,
And while that is true that everyone learns differently, the literature does support certain techniques that work better than
right.
others.
The techniques are there, but some people use Pomodoro, some people use, other things. But the key of it is like, don't say, oh, I'm gonna try really hard, because PA school, medical school, nursing, all of this stuff is much, 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 much faster rate because they expect you to be good at studying. And I could tell you that this is like the biggest struggle with college students and people that want to go this route is that you're gonna have to like be a good at studying. Like there's no way around it.
And that's essentially your job, other than at least in if you're going into a medical career, to get to that point of caring for patients, you're gonna have half of your job is being a student, and you're gonna have to know how to learn effectively. Right. And so, really, if you haven't yet dived into like the literature, the research, the science of learning, I highly, highly, highly advise in that you look into this stuff and really go down that journey of like figuring out what the science has to say about how humans learn and how can you take and apply some of those techniques, how Juven just mentioned, to your own life to become a more effective, a more efficient learner. Because at the end of the day, these resources, these techniques are going to save you time, and they're going to hopefully allow you to get higher scores on your examinations.
Yeah, and because like medicine and everything is so test heavy, but at the end of the day, like the biggest picture is like people's lives are going to be in your hand. And even though, I mean, I've heard this somebody say, goes, oh, well, as a PA, you don't have that much responsibility. You always have and that's not the truth because a doctor's not going to be looking over your head every single day. And you have your own license So, and I know some people have said that, oh, well, you don't have to worry because there's going to be a doctor there. And I can tell you some people that have been PAs for a long time are, have really good skill set, but it's the whole learning part of it. And so somebody's life is in your hand. And so like think that, and that's like a really important thing is, people that are going to depend on you, not just like your teammates or your coworkers, but like people's lives. And so like get this done, and this stuff is hard because you have people's lives in your hand, because diabetes is not fair, hypertension is not fair, and all of these things that you deal with are not fair. And so that's why it's so hard to get into PA school and medical school and all of these different things. So kind of my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I agree. So now to continue chugging along and hopefully have some time for questions, we just wanted to give you guys a list of resources that Omar and I compiled. And in the chat, I'm going to drop a document with all of the links and things you guys see here, so you guys can save that. Let me drop that now. These are the links. Yeah, I should say they're links to resources for the didactic clinical year. And the first thing that we'll highlight is know what resources your program provides. And so before you go out and buy these question banks or like start spending your own pocket, and really try to, if you're already accepted to a PA program, try to reach out either to upperclassmen, like I mentioned before, or to your current program faculty to see what are they providing. UC Davis, I know, provided us an osmosis subscription and Exam Master, which is a practice question test bank. And then Omar, what was your experience at Stanford?
So ours was Exam Master and My PA Prep, and then eventually for our clerkships they provided Raj. But I will say, like Mari mentioned, like know what your school provides, and if they don't provide something that you want, like, and then multiple classmates want, come together, send an email, and or just talk to them, tell them how you've heard from upperclassmen, or reviews how important this platform has been, and ask them if there's a budget for it. And we did that, to be honest, to try to get Raj for didactic, and it didn't work out. But the people below us, the new class, got Raj the entire time. So I mean, they reaped the benefits of us coming together. But nonetheless, maybe sometimes they can like maneuver and find a budget for a platform that y'all want.
Yep. And then other things as well is for a lot of these test banks, they are kind of pricey, and they do range in the hundreds of dollars for like 1 year subscription. And one of the other things as well is if you have a bunch of classmates, you can a lot of times reach out to these companies like Rosh Review or Sketchy and ask for a group discount. And then if that doesn't work out, you can also just get a group together and share an account and share the login and password. And most of these are kind of like Netflix. You're able to be logged in at the same time. So that's just something that we wanted to put out there. But one of the things that we both found really helpful, at least my biggest recommendation, is the Rosh Review didactic question.
Mine too, no matter what.
And this one is it's money in gold. It really reflected the questions and the types of things that we were tested during didactic year. Even though didactic, like your exams are kind of like an undergrad, the exams are written by your professors. There's still, because it's medicine, there's a lot of overlap. And typically this Rosh Review didactic question bank was just like a degree more difficult and more thorough than, at least in my experience, than the exams that my professors were writing. And so what that meant is that I was much more prepared. I was accustomed to answering questions that were more difficult than what I was actually going to see come exam day, which, as you can imagine, is advantageous. And then the
explanations that Raj provided were honestly A1, amazing. There's enough detail in there for you to learn an entire topic, to be honest. And the pictures, the colors, everything's organized pretty well, I would say.
Yep. And then Sketchy is one of those tools where they tell essentially stories and cartoons for you to remember different conditions, different systems, and things like that. And the other one that's comparable to Sketchy is Osmosis, but I personally prefer Sketchy. And you can kind of visit that link to learn more about that. And then Metacomic is free. You can just Google whatever condition you're interested in learning in. Let's say you're learning the certain breath sounds of the lungs. You can search up breath sounds, Metacomic, and you'll get a picture that'll help you remember that. And then we also recommend the Ninja Nerd YouTube channel and Armando Hasdungan YouTube channel. And fun fact about Ninja Nerd, that guy, he actually is a physician assistant. And so he has, I feel like he has covered at this point through his channel every topic of medicine. And he is very, very gifted at just breaking it down and making it understandable, no matter what your background is. And then we'll say it again, reach out to upperclassmen for any study guides, illness scripts, or charts, and because I guarantee you they have them. And again, it's going to save you a lot of time when you're in your didactic year. And then one of the other popular podcasts that you can listen to is Cram the Pants, which also does an overview of common medical topics and acronyms that'll help you for your medicine learning. And then we'll talk about clinical year to wrap up. And so the first thing that I'll mention here for clinical year is that no matter what PA program you're at, you're required to do a set of core rotations, which includes family medicine, internal medicine, behavioral medicine, mental health, pediatrics, women's health, which is like OB-GYN, emergency medicine, surgery. And then these 3 electives, these are, as you can imagine, electives, so they're not part of the core rotation requirement that is required by the PAEA, which is the organization that oversees like education for PA programs. I will mention that for UC Davis, we only had one quote unquote elective, and it's not really an elective. They call it a selective rotation because it's essentially they let you they allow you to tell them like what you're interested in, but there's no guarantee that you'll get it. So like I put that I wanted to do neurosurgery for my selective, and I ended up getting oncology, which is cancer, the cancer clinic. And so that's at least how my experience was at UC Davis. And then Omar, is your guys's electives true electives where you guys get to like dictate what you guys want to see?
Supposedly, well, like we put in so we get 3, and they want us to put our top 5, and then if they can't get our top 3, they'll try to give us the 4th pick and the 5th pick. You don't always get what you want, but it seems like they might not get one of them, but at very least they'll try to get your top 1. Like for example, I put in 5. I put like emergency medicine. I put in the CV, cardiovascular, ICU. I put in sports medicine. I think I put orthopedic surgery, and then maybe like urgent care. And I got pediatrics, sports medicine, and I got urgent care. So, they got some of them.
All right. And then one of the things, this chart here is highlighting Stanford's clinical breakdown. And your guys' rotations are 5 weeks as well?
4 weeks.
4 weeks? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
4
So in a quarter, you guys would go through 3
of them.
3 clerkships, 3 different rotations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Which was a little different. Well, one less than at UC Davis.
5 weeks?
We would do 5-week rotations, and we would do 2 rotations per quarter. And that's essentially what you see here. This is an example of one single semester or quarter at UC Davis, where we would have our supervised clinical practice in the same stuff like pediatrics, women's health, psychiatry, emergency medicine, surgery. And this is 12 units, of course, because that's the bulk of your hours is doing the clinical rotations. And then we had a 1-unit class where we would come in about once every like 2 or 3 weeks to work on clinical skills. And then I believe this one was an online course that we took one of the quarters where we were like learning like research skills and stuff like that. All right, we'll continue chugging. Clinical year advice. I'll let you take over, Omar.
Yeah, so just like how we keep saying, right, give yourself grace. Know your non-negotiables, and it gets very busy. Like for example, with clerkship year, I mean with that year too, but clerkship year, you're essentially restarting a new job every 4 to 5 weeks, right? And to me, that's very difficult because it's restarting. Sometimes I would move. Sometimes I'm in a wave rotation. I would move my stuff, and it's new people, new faces, new introductions, new department, new parking lot. I have to figure out like all these things, like kind of like drain you just a little bit, right? And the fact that it's so many of them kind of drain your battery, as I'm mentioning. So even more important to remember your non-negotiables and to figure out how can I best be able to give my all in these rotations. And for me, that was to take breaks like these. Like, for example, I went on the 1 week summer break that I had. I went to Mexico. I went to my parents' motherland, Rancho. And then on one weekend, where I probably could have been studying, I decided to go back to LA and I went to a festival. And although some people would say that's not really vacation, you tire yourself out. I might have tired myself out more, but it actually recharged my soul. Like just going back home, seeing my family, and maybe going out a night or two. And one thing to remember is like, since you're starting every month or every 5 weeks or so, a new job, right? Those could be potentially job offers. So, for example, like if you really want to go into like pediatrics, you probably want to give it your all, right? But regardless, you never know. You don't want to like take yourself out, and you want to just be open to working in this new environment because you might find that you like that rotation. And like for me, example, I've enjoyed every single rotation, some more than others, but treat it as if it's an interview, right? You might get a job offer, and that's why you're in PA school, right? To make money at the same time, provide care. So if you're lucky and if you play your cards right, you might have multiple offers, and that saves you the stress of like looking for jobs when you graduate. Can again give yourself grace. You're gonna have bad days, you're gonna have good days, but things will get better. In the beginning, things are pretty rough. It's a completely different world. You're busy. You have to be alert and oriented times 4 at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. You can't just go to class and be brain dead, right? Like you have to be like on it. And it's tough to get accustomed to that, in all honesty. And some of these rotations are quite different than the others. So you might not have reviewed over vaccinations since whatever quarter. So it can get tough, but it will get better. And but on the days that you don't feel like you feel like you're digressing, continue to give yourself grace, and give yourself a little hug, and continue to do the things that bring you happiness, and continue to de-stress. Go to the gym, take a walk, throw a frisbee, whatever that might be. Anything you want to add, Mario?
I would just say, when you start clinical year, that transition from didactic to clinicals to seeing patients to being, to wearing the white coat, having the stethoscope, and, like having the pocket guide on one pocket and then the other pocket guide, having like 15 pocket guides for like everybody's system. That first week, that first rotation, like you're going to be overwhelmed, you and everyone else in your cohort. And that is exactly what you are supposed to be. You're going to feel overwhelmed. And just know that your preceptors, the program directors, they know that. And so if you have, they don't have to be amazing preceptors, but just, decent human beings that are preceptors, tell them like, hey, this is my first day, this is my first week. And they are not going to throw you off the deep end if they are, good preceptors. They are going to, take your hand. They're going to, treat you like you're a kid in training wheels, and slowly give you more responsibility, slowly increase the expectations of what it takes to be a provider. On day one, I would not expect you to be coming up with a full treatment plan, but I would want to hear your thoughts on what you think is going on in terms of a diagnosis. On day one, I would not expect you to give the type of medication and specific dose, but towards the end of your clinical training, of your clinical rotations, you are going to be expected to not only come up with the diagnosis, with the plan, with what medication to take, with what dose to give, with what education to give to a patient. But again, that'll come with time. And so just hang on. Like we've said it, I think if there's anything you take away from this talk today is to give yourself grace through this process, but also recognize that if you got into PA school, you're fully capable of getting out, thriving, and passing your board exam. And in those moments that you are feeling overwhelmed, those are in that moment, that is the opportunity for growth. When you feel like the walls are closing in, when you feel like, oh my gosh, like my anxiety's, going through the roof, like I'm sweating bullets right now, and I'm about to go talk to this patient, and I feel like my voice is quivering. Those are the moments that are growing you into the provider that your community needs. And so trust the process and know the fact that like all of these I guess ladders that we're climbing on this journey are going to be overwhelming, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And you're not the first, and you're also not going to be the last to climb and feel overwhelmed as you advance. Okay. And then here's just a little quick picture as well of my own break. I know during I think I took a break between one of my clinical rotations. We had like, I think spring break. I went out to Mazatlan, Sinaloa with my wife, and that's me playing the drums with the banda. But yeah, again, these things, especially music and playing Mexican music is one of the things that just feeds my soul. And just how Omar said, it gives you, it's a different type of rest that kind of resets and recharges you to come back. And that's a good thing, to take a break from medicine at times, because when you're in the trenches of PA school, you are gonna drink, sleep, breathe, eat medicine, and at times
bleed.
And at times it's going to feel like you're eating a bowl of oatmeal, and you've been eating that bowl of oatmeal for 365 days now. And you like look at it, and they, you show up to lecture again, and they're serving you another bowl of oatmeal, and you're just like gagging at the thought that, okay, we're going to learn more medicine. But just know that these breaks, your non-negotiables, you going out to visit your family, you going out to, wherever motherland is for you, these are things that are going to recharge you, and these are things that aren't important. So that's what we were trying to highlight here. Let's see what else. And then in that same document that I shared, the link to resources for clinical year, and we have a summary of just some of the resources that we found helpful for clinical year. What you'll notice is that a lot of these are test banks, practice questions. And that's really the take-home thing, is that during didactic and clinical year, you're going to want to be doing practice questions from either like Rosh Review or UWorld. And then one of the podcasts that we also recommend is Physician Assistant in a Flash, which you can Google. But again, we wanted to give you guys this document so you guys can, save it. And when you get into your PA program, because all 38 of you that are logged in are at one point, if you're a pre-PA or you're applying, you're going to get in. It's not a matter of if, but when. And when you get in, you're going to go back to this document, and you will be a step ahead of the curve, and you're going to start reaching out to your upperclassmen. And then we're going to hear back. You're going to reach out to us and tell us how great you're doing in your didactic and clinical year. And let's see what else we got. And then some also on that document is just briefly some resources for the PANCE, which is the Physician Assistant National Certifying Examination. This is the final exam that you need to take to become a board certified PA. And then there's just some resources that we recommend. And then note, all of these paid subscriptions can be shared. And so I highly advise you get a group of classmates together and split the cost. Kind of like you have multiple people on your Netflix login. You can do the same for Rosh and UWorld. And so, yeah, but you didn't hear it from me. You didn't hear it from us. Okay.
Not at all.
And then that is pretty much it. So I know the time is 7:24. So we have, hopefully we can do like 10 minutes to answer any questions. But we hope ultimately that this was insightful for you guys, kind of gave you a little taste of what to expect. And more than anything, we're trying with this session to equip you guys with the expectations and also with the tools. So like the techniques, the things that we did to, study the Pomodoro, the ultra radian technique, all these things are things that Omar and I have like implemented, or are things that we've used to be successful in our own PA journey. And so, yeah, we'll open it up for questions. And then the other thing that I'll highlight is our contact information. And you can reach me at themexicanpa@gmail.com. And you can reach Omar at omarmnunez7@gmail.com. And our Gmails are open to you guys for any questions that, again, we don't, address here. And so with that, we will go into our round of Q&A.
Q&A.
Let me close. Let me stop sharing.
So the first question we have from the chat is, what sorts of PC did you do before applying for PA schools?
All right,
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to give a little summary, I did. I was an EMT for about 2.5 years, and most of my or all of my PCE came from being EMT and just taking on a leadership role as an EMT. That's pretty much it. Mario, you too?
Oh, I was just reading the question. Sorry, I had like a poker face going on, huh? I worked also as an EMT. So I did, after graduating from UCLA in 2018, I worked for about 2 years with American Medical Response in San Bernardino County, doing 911, BLS, which is just like interfacility transports, and then doing 911 calls on ALS and doing critical care transports, where I worked with either a respiratory therapist or a nurse. After that, I got a job right when COVID started in the emergency room, doing what Juman does as an emergency room tech. And so got to essentially see the inside of a level one trauma center and do all the things like cutting, with our traumas, cutting the clothes off and hooking them up to the monitor and just helping our physicians and the rest of the trauma team with their job, or even doing other things like restocking carts or things like sitting for our psychiatric and behavioral health patients. Yep.
All right. Our next question we have in the chat is, after finishing nursing in Sacramento State University, the attendee is asking, can they do PA at UC Davis?
You certainly can if you have the stats and the GPA and the hours. So I would again recommend searching up UC Davis PA program on Google and visiting the website of our program so that you can see the specific requirements, the classes required, the hours required, and really all of the things that they like to see in an applicant.
The next
The
question.
other option that you would have to is getting your DNP, which is Doctor of Nursing, and that's another route as well if you already have your nursing degree, because some programs will actually like pay for you to finish that. Some employers would do that. I know that a couple places that one of the places that I work at, I think they give a $25,000 scholarship, but they also have a deal with the program as well with Samuel Merritt, where you get a huge discount. And so look at those as well. I mean, you just have to know what's the big difference between a PA and a nurse practitioner. But as a nurse, you have a couple more options than you do as somebody who just got a BA or BS, BA or BS, and then goes that route as well.
The RN route. Yeah, and one thing also for that student, if you're interested in staying in Sacramento, UC Davis Health also has a nurse practitioner program. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would again look into that. But you could,
yeah,
Davis.
But also but it's the key part of it is the scope of practice, because there is difference between PAs, certainly in California, or where you want to go. And so some places nurse practitioners have more autonomy and more scopes. Some other places are PAs, and that's just something you need to really research for yourself, because it is like it is I mean, it is your life, and it's next 30 years. And so
yeah. All right, next question.
The next question we have is, how were you able to balance studying for these courses in a short amount of time? Do you prioritize the large unit subjects first?
And so I can touch on this a little bit. Essentially, the large unit courses, I think Omar and I will agree on this. It was really based on which exams were coming our way. Mm-hmm. Like if today, today's Sunday, if I had an exam tomorrow for anatomy, I would be studying for anatomy. And if I had the exam of pharmacology on Wednesday, that's something that would wait. So that was one way that we would, I guess, you're continually triaging and allocating your time. But also kind of how we discussed today, doing the interleaving of material is also one solid way to prevent yourself from neglecting some of these lower unit courses or courses that maybe the exam is after the first exam that you're studying for. Omar, what would you add?
No, I agree. You're kind of forced to study whatever exam is coming up, and I think so. How do you balance it? You honestly trial and error. Like you start to really figure out how little or how much you know of the subject already, and that guides you and your time spent on certain units. Yeah, that's all I would add. It's trial and error.
All right, our next question we have in the chat is when do I start using spaced repetition, aka flashcards, before, during, or after testing yourself?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say at the same time if possible. And so like ideally you would have let's say like your lectures or whatever. You would be doing, let's say like these are lectures for your like pathophysiology or anatomy class. If you take those lectures, you convert them into Quizlet, or you and your classmate convert them into Anki, and you have your flashcards, and you're going to be studying those to make sure that you're covering the material that's on those slides. And then you're on top of that doing 10 or 15 or 20 questions a day using resources like the Rosh Review question bank to supplement. And so ideally you'd be doing both. Yeah, I think that would be the answer to that question.
Yeah.
To follow up on that question, it's my own question. When it comes to making the cards for the Anki or Quizlet, are you passively studying while making the Anki cards, especially since like some classes have like a lot of content and you only have such a short time frame to study for it? Would you just try and make the flashcards as fast as possible, or try and study slowly and try and understand the cards before you actually make the cards?
That's a tough one. Anki deck, I mean, I loved Anki deck. I will say I tried at some point doing my Anki decks and I realized it takes me too long. But I was personally like learning as I'm making them. Now, the more I had to make, the less I was retaining information because the quicker I was going through them. One thing I will also advise, if like use your upperclassmen, a lot of my upperclassmen already had Anki decks, and I just would compile them all together and just use that to my advantage. Instead of spending time on Anki decks, I would probably spend more time on organizing my notes. But that was just me. A lot of people love Anki decks, and I think it's very important. A lot of people actually love making their own. And it just whatever works for you, in all honesty.
And one of the things that I would add is that typically, if you just like went to lecture, you can either make the cards after, which I would do a lot of times, or I would do the lectures that I had been to previously. Like I would do those in the morning. Or if you get really good and if you're able to do this, and I started doing this like I think after the first quarter, you're making Anki cards, you're making your flashcards, you're making your questions essentially in real time during the lecture, and that forces you to essentially be an active participant in the information that's being thrown at you, because as you're learning cardiology, as you're learning pulmonology, they talk about a medication and you're taking that, converting it into a question and throwing it into Anki, throwing it into Quizlet, and at the end of class, rather than walking away with, let's say, a notebook full of notes that you like, you were word for word writing or typing in what the professor said, you walk away from that with a way to test yourself. You walk away from that lecture with flashcards from that lecture. And so that is personally, and I think everyone would agree, that is a probably more efficient use of your time to, in real time, while you're in a lecture, be creating material that you're going to be able to use to test yourself with after.
The only thing that I would add is making flashcards, Anki, all that different stuff. Doing it the day before the exam is bad.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're not doing it as a checkoff. Like just kind of, you have to kind of put this in the back of your mind. You're doing it for learning, and so in maybe some sessions, you may not need to do it. You may find stuff on the internet. You could so you have to like triage and see what works for you. I personally, I think I love Anki, but if somebody makes it for me and I could do it just because it takes me forever to do it. I'm still really fast with this thing called pen and paper. And so I make flashcards on note cards. Or now you could do it on iPad as well. And so you just got to figure out what works for you. And but doing it, you're not doing it as an assignment. You're doing it for
For
what
your own
you
work.
need to learn. Yeah. And why making a flashcard of something you know? Like if you know something, um, don't do it. You don't need to, you don't need to do it. I got I'm taking a biopsychology class right now, and I sat through an ACLS class, even though I'm ACLS certified, so I knew a lot of the drugs and stuff. So I'm not reviewing or making because I know that stuff, but stuff that I don't know, like maybe brain anatomy, like yeah, I'm making flashcards and doing the whole whiting out the answers and trying to do it that way. So do what works for you. Like don't do it as a assignment.
All right, our next question we have in the chat is reflecting on your undergrad experiences. Is there anything you would do differently in preparation for entry into a PA program?
Oh, that's a good question. Omar, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, let me finish reading it. Sorry. So, is there anything you would undergraduate? One thing I do, maybe it might or might not be helpful, but one thing I do maybe regret or think about a lot is how much time I allocated to studying and being a quote unquote perfect student or trying to bring my GPA up. I sacrificed a lot. I will say a lot more than I would want. And although it paid off in the long run, I still think I would have preferred to make a little bit more time for my family and for events that are important to me, my non-negotiables, as we were mentioning. I think I would have been one happier and two not burnt out as I was my senior year as an undergrad. Hence why I heavily considered leaving medicine. But I think that's one thing. And another thing is, I mean, it's hard to just say, but don't be shy, right? It's easier said than done. Don't be shy. Shoot your shot with professors, not in the but like in the way of like asking them questions, asking them if they need someone in their lab, like if they need additional researchers, asking PAs on LinkedIn, asking doctors on LinkedIn, anyone on LinkedIn. Don't be shy to reach out to them. You'll realize the more you reach out, you'll have a script, a template where you can just literally copy and paste and just change the name and send it to everyone, literally everyone. And even if you send 100 emails and one gets back to you, that's one PA or doctor shadowing experience. So yeah, be resilient, but also be resilient with like trying to network to your capability, of course.
The next question we have is, how did you make your school list? What did you do? What did you look for in a school?
Take it away, Mario.
I think this one depends on the individual student, but one of the things that I will highlight, and again, I won't dive into all of them, but I talk about there's a YouTube video that I have called "How to Choose the Best." Like how to choose a PA program or that's best for you. And one of the things, the first thing that I talk about is location. Really, wherever you see yourself working, wherever like you really see yourself working, that's one of the things that you should be looking for in a PA program. Because if you see yourself working in, like, let's say I don't know, like New York, it would be advantageous to get into a program in New York because during your rotations, you're going to make connections, you're going to network, you're going to meet physicians and doctors and get exposed to health systems that are going to help you form the connections to get a job in New York. And so that's one of the things. And the other things is really like what your support system is. If it's important for you to stay near your family, it may be better to go to a program near where your family is at. Versus if you're a student who you think like, nah, dude, like my my family is toxic, and then it might be best for you to move across, the country. Again, it's individual to every student, but I would also recommend, if you're trying to make that decision, to check out that video. I'll make sure to drop it in the chat right now. And the other thing is also making sure that your program's accredited. So all PA programs are accredited by the National Commission of Certification of PAs, the NCC PA. And they actually they receive like an actual accreditation stamp of approval. And that really means that you are going to a quality program that is meeting the strict requirements. And there's a lot of requirements for PA programs to become accredited. And there are programs out there who you will see will be accredited probation or provisional. Provisional, that just means that it's a newer program that hasn't yet achieved full accreditation. And accreditation probation is typically programs that have done something wrong, whether that's they forgot to submit certain paperwork, or they don't have the adequate faculty ratio or staff for their students, or they don't have the adequate appropriate rotation sites. And that is something that you kind of want to look out for and avoid. If you get into a program that's accredited and a program that's on probation, I am 100% going to tell you go to the fully accredited program. And in some contexts, or in some situations, sometimes students can find themselves attending or being accepted to a school that has probation, and then they lose their accreditation because they didn't meet the requirements that placed them on probation in the first place. And a perfect example of this, and you can Google this on your own time, is the Western University PA program. They had this exact situation happen, and students who had interviewed for the program, who were accepted into a seat at their program, essentially were left empty-handed, and because, again, of accreditation requirements. So that's the thing. Look at the accreditation requirements and location, and then what you value kind of the most. And I'll put that video in the chat.
Yeah, and the other part of it too is also the patient population. Like you gotta want to see those patient population. If you don't want to be in an urban inner city, like don't go to a school that's an urban city. If you don't want to do rural, like don't go to a rural school. So just, and where the rotations are. So that's kind of a thing you got to look at as well. So
yeah, and there's too many things that honestly that go into PA programs. Like it can be exhaustive. I think just make an Excel sheet, everything that you would want in a PA program. But nonetheless, going to a PA program is better than not going to any PA programs, right? So if for some reason like you get accepted into one PA school, like you probably should take it, right? At the end of the day, you don't need to go to a big institution. I know like it might be like me and my Mario obviously go to like higher institutions, bigger institutions, but like you don't need that. None of us need that. You can still become the best PA you can possibly be and still network and make the best out of it. If you make the best out of your experience at a PA program versus someone at a big institution doesn't, like you probably will get a better experience and still have like, those amazing letter of regs and everything. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Next question.
Next question we have is, how did you deal with imposter syndrome as a first-gen student?
This question is actually pretty heavy. I think the silence reflects the fact that this one requires a longer answer. And I
answer it for you?
Go ahead, Juven.
No.
I think you still struggle with it. I think everybody struggles with it.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it is. It comes down to is that, and a little bit of that imposter syndrome is healthy.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
because it kind of serves as like a safety rail for you to, think twice before you write that prescription, or think twice before you, give that controlled substance, or think twice before you decide to like intubate someone. I think that the ultimately imposter syndrome is overcome through experience over time. The reason we have imposter syndrome a lot of times is because we're in unfamiliar territory and we feel overwhelmed. And as you progress through your training, as I'm about to, I'm currently interviewing for PA jobs, and I'm I mean, if you ask me, I'm pretty scared about my first day of working as a PA and seeing patients. That is, you know, a scary thought. But I know that that is the next step in the ladder that I'm climbing, and I know that it's going to be okay. I'm going to have mentorship. I'm going to have the people around me to support me, hopefully from, you know, my future employer, and there's going to be that imposter syndrome on day one, and I imagine that imposter syndrome is going to be around for, you know, decades of practice, and we'll mitigate it. We'll make it smaller. That will make that voice smaller through experience, through exposure, through the unfamiliar becoming familiar.
Yeah, I have a
And
good
I'll
friend.
add.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, what I'll add is, you know, everyone and anyone can go through this. Like, you might, like, not realize it, but a lot of people, if not everyone, is going through this. And I think that the difference is, like, you know, some of us who come from underrepresented or are minorities, right? Like, it hits different. The definition of imposter syndrome is different because we might feel intimidated, like maybe we don't know enough, right? Like, you might feel like you're an imposter there, but there's also the other level. Other tier can be like, I don't belong here in these institutions because no one like here looks like me or comes from a similar background and might not understand me. So that tier of it as a minority, I think, is can be difficult, and it's probably running behind your mind without you even knowing. But just know that these are ideals, ideas that are like that society has imposed on us, right? Everyone, society makes you think you don't belong there, right? And at this point, like, the world is changing. Just know that this is not you. This is your body, your emotions reacting to society's norms. And society is going to change, and you're going to be part of that change. You're going to make that change. So I think being conscious of that will help you get over that hurdle and become more comfortable with yourself and, you know, in places like these.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add is just like, you know, Omar knows this person, Perez, and this person's the dean at a medical school, and he's been doing this for a while, and he's like, he still has imposter syndrome. So yeah, I think it's just something you're gonna have it, and I think it's healthy to keep you on your toes, but unhealthy if it paralyzes you.
Yep, that's it.
Agreed.
And with that, I know we still have quite a bit more questions, and I do want to say that we still have, this is the third installment of 5, so we have one more session where we're going to be talking about, I forgot the topic. What is session 4 about, Jubin?
It has to do with us belonging in medicine. So
Okay, which is gonna dive right into this topic. And then session 5 will just be a formal Q&A session where we'll be able to answer all questions. So I think with that,
and we'll say the number 4, the next one, we're going to be showing you a lot of probably like mind-boggling facts of, you know, medicine as a minority and all the hardships and just sad truth and facts about minorities in medicine and how we suffer from it. And I think it might be a pretty good one. I believe it'll like fuel most of us to pursue medicine even more. So, yeah.
Yep. So that is, make sure you tune into the next session. And with that, and out of respect for everyone's time, it is 7:49, 7:50 p.m. And so I think we'll call it quits for the Q&A. But again, we will continue to answer questions at the next session, session 4, and then session 5 will be a full Q&A session. And on behalf of Pre-Med TC, on behalf of Omar and myself, and we're thankful for everyone who joined us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks on Sunday at 6 p.m. again.
Later, y'all.
Mario. Oh, he left. Never mind. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, Jubin. Good night.
Stay out of trouble.
Bye.
You too.